Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Plant-Free MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today I have a very special guest, Dr. Nash Jocic, who is a professional bodybuilder and trainer, and is here to tell us about his insights into bodybuilding, nutrition, and training, as well as many other things. So, Dr. Jocic, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you for inviting me, and this is a great opportunity to work with you together, which I really appreciate. And let me introduce myself in few words. Mm-hmm. So I have always been interested in optimal development of my being, meaning my intellectual, spiritual, and physical development. And I have found the answers for that, first of all, in philosophy. So I studied philosophy, and I have a PhD in philosophy, because this was, for me, the best way to optimize my intellectual development. Now, when it comes to my physical development, I couldn't find any better choice than to inquire about bodybuilding. Now, although I didn't study formally, I studied on my own accord, and I did a lot of research from the very early age about anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, biochemistry, nutrition, and as a result of all my studies and research, I've put those findings and that knowledge into practice to prove it, and it worked very well for me. And in the meantime, I published 10 books on training, nutrition, lifestyle change, training for beginners, and similar. And also I spent over 40 years in bodybuilding. I competed 46 times. I won 17 titles. And I trained over 3,500 clients so far and helped them to get in the best shape of their lives. Now, what is important, and I always say that to a lot of people who send comments and ask questions on my YouTube channel, I'm always talking about optimized development of muscle size and fat loss. People are always trying to find some combinations or some comfort zones, or try to, make life easier in a way by asking, can I train 2 times per week, or maybe 3 times? Can I eat this, but can I add that? This is too much protein. And well, you said not much carbs. But again, I remind everybody, every time I talk about these subjects, I'm trying to give an answer that will help you to, again, optimize. So I'm giving the 100% answer, trying to help you understand that you should be doing the best that you can, always, across the board, in anything you do in life. So why would you do less than 100%? I mean, what is life all about? It's an opportunity for us to be the best that we can be.
Absolutely. So you mentioned there limiting carbohydrates. That's obviously something that I see a lot. There's a lot of big push now, eating hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of grams of carbs, 600, 800 grams of carbs a day. If you're trying to be a bodybuilder, they say you have to have carbs to put on muscle. And when I try to tell people about this, about ketogenic diets, they say, oh, well, but you can't build muscle without carbs. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you see, my first reaction is a smile and laugh. Yeah. Because this is absolutely not true. I mean, if we go back into fundamentals of human physiology, we will understand that carbohydrates are macronutrient that has no nutritional value. There is nothing there. It's a pure energy. So we use carbohydrates only to store energy. We don't do anything else with them. Now, what is the most important for developing muscle size? It is actually protein. Protein comes from Greek word protos, proton in physics, meaning essential, number one, the most important. And this is why that macronutrient has got that name. So this is how we came to protein. Now, protein is so essential that there is not enough explanation and research to prove that. not only for muscles, but for all other tissues, like bones, for example, all internal organs, heart, lungs, digestive system, kidney, liver, skin, hair, nails, everything that people are so interested in. And there are all these tissues, hormones, nerves, nervous system, everything is made of protein. So that macronutrient is so essential that should be really taken as the primary macronutrient. Now, if we remind ourselves, for example, from anthropological findings, that humans, Homo sapiens, that according to some experts has been around for some 400,000 years, most of that time humans simply didn't have access to carbohydrates. So we evolved around the natural environment, around the circumstances that we have been exposed. This is how we evolved our physical existence, our bodies, our anatomy. And carbohydrates are very, very limited throughout this huge span of evolution of Homo sapiens. Now, how did Homo sapiens evolve? Can anybody imagine that our ancestors didn't have enough glycogen? They had to have glycogen in their bodies for the purpose of surviving, fighting, hunting, running away. So how would you do that if you're not full of glycogen? But the glycogen comes from if there is no rice, pasta, cereals, and all this. So humans developed the ability to create glycogen from protein, from amino acids, and also ketones. This is through the process of called gluconeogenesis that liver actually executes in order to convert amino acids and ketones into glycogen. But the thing to understand is that via gluconeogenesis, you will always create as much as you need, not more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And your glycogen stores will never be 100% full, which they don't have to be for example, successful bodybuilding workout. Now, back to your question, 400, 500, 600 grams, Jay cut 1,000 grams of carbohydrates a day. I mean, this is simply insane. We don't have the ability to store that into the muscle tissue. Therefore, exogenic compounds like, for example, insulin are necessary in order to drive that huge amount of carbohydrates into the muscle. Nobody knows how much of those carbohydrates will end up in the muscle and how much will spill over into the fat cells. We can only guess, but I think that carbohydrates are the main culprit of all chronic diseases that we are exposed, not just now, but since the discovery of agriculture. I write that in my books as well. And chronic diseases, even cancers, they didn't exist before introduction of agriculture.
Yeah.
I went to British Museum a few times doing my research on my own. For example, studying the mummies there, and if you observe them properly, usually people come and say, "Oh, they won't look at this; they are a few thousand years old." But it doesn't matter how old they are. What matters is what they're talking to you. They're talking volume. Look into their jaws, for example. The jaws will never develop enough because they didn't have enough protein in their diet. Egyptian mummies, most of them have no teeth. The ones with the remaining teeth have only few, which are rotten. If you look at the skin folds around their bellies, it's huge. So they were all obese. This didn't come from eating eggs, fish, and meat. This came exclusively for eating overwhelmingly huge amount of grains. So this is an answer in general, but back to the question about bodybuilding, do you really need so much carbs? No, you don't, because you don't grow from carbs. You need protein to grow. Carbohydrates are there just to fuel your energy. But I always say to people, if you're eating them, you should be only eating the necessary minimum. Everything more than that is going to go into the fat stores, is going to cause hyperproduction of insulin, and is going to cause havoc on your metabolic level.
Yeah, you hear that phrase going around that you need a caloric surplus in order to gain muscle, but just with the word surplus means surplus to demand. There's more than you need, and so wouldn't that necessarily go into fat? And so if you're eating mass quantities of these things past your demand, wouldn't that necessarily go into fat that you would then have to burn later?
Absolutely. Another thing that I also tackle in my books on nutrition is that game of counting calories.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, calories lie. They are not, calorie is not a calorie.
Yeah.
See, if I give you a diet yeah, if I give you a diet of 1,600 calories, which is made of 400 grams of carbs, and I give somebody else or you 3 months later the same caloric intake, but this time from 400 grams of protein, what do you think is going to happen? There are two different universes there. In first occasion, you're going to get fat with 1,600 calories because you're going to be producing so much insulin. There is no other way. Those carbs will just be taken into fat cells. If you are on 400 grams of protein, you will be converting energy from your fat stores. So you're going to be losing fat. And if you need glycogen as much as you need, the body will convert from protein into glycogen via gluconeogenesis. So this caloric intake, that never works. I mean, people are asking me about, they come with whole spreadsheet of meals and calories, and they're so immersed into that mathematical equations and calculating in their minds. I mean, all right, I don't want to go there scientifically, but let me just tell you a very simple example. Arnold, Sergio Oliva, Serge Nubre, Albert Beckles, Robbie Robinson, whoever was there, Frank Zane, they didn't count calories. They didn't even know what calories are. So how did they manage to build amazing, according to me, never surpassed bodies and physiques? How did they do that? Arnold never counted calories. He never did much about anything anyway, but he was following his instincts, and they were all on high protein, medium to low fat diet. Most of the year, they would eat some carbs occasionally, but once the things become serious before big shows, immediately they will switch to the best possible diet for muscle growth and fat loss, which is without any doubt high protein, medium fat, low carb.
Yeah. So is that, I mean, and I've spoken about this too, the golden era bodybuilders like Serge Nubret, Arnold, Vince Gironda, who's sort of even a bit before that. It was steak and eggs, steak and eggs, steak and eggs. Serge was like 6 pounds of horse meat a day. Arnold, in his video on the movie Pumping Iron, when he was talking about his meals, he's like, yeah, I'm not like these guys where I can just eat 4 pounds of meat at one time. I've got to have 10-ounce steak here, another one here, some eggs here. I've got to split it up through the day. But the only thing he mentioned was meat, and he didn't say anything about carbs.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And they were all big, they were huge.
Monsters.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I was lucky to go and meet Serge Nubret myself. In two occasions, I ended up in Paris in 82 and 83. I believe I spent each time I spent 1 month in his gym, which is called Serge Nubret International Fitness Center in Belleville in Paris. And I mean, one only had to see Serge Nubret in front of him to understand the magnificent, not just huge, but body, which was out of this world. He was so big, he was so pumped, covered with veins. The skin was like almost non-existing. And that man stands in front of you, and that talks everything. So how did he do it? I just did a video, which is going to be out tomorrow morning at 10 UK time on his diet. And I didn't believe anything I read before. Because people were saying 6, 7, 8 pounds of meat a day. Some would push to 10. In reality, it was 6. He said it himself. But I just couldn't believe it because I was then completely deluded in Mike Mentzer theory of heavy-duty training 3, 4 times per week, some huge weights, eating 60, 70% of carbs, maybe 5, 6 times a day. I was 112 kgs, but a lump, right? It was not, I wasn't obese, but I was fat, full of water, strong, okay? And then when I went there, I was completely shocked to see that almost so many of them in the gym, they looked amazing. They were ripped, they were big, veins popping out all the time. And they were all on high protein, medium fat diet, like Serge Nubret. And I saw him eating as well. I never saw a man eating so much meat in one sitting. It was probably around 3 pounds of steak. And he just ate that and nothing else with it. So when I asked him, do you eat vegetables at all? He said, no, why would I eat vegetables? I'm not a rabbit. It was very funny. And I asked him about what about eggs? He said, eggs, they are fantastic. I said, how many do you eat? I said, I don't eat eggs. Why? He says, I don't like them.
Mhm.
What are you going to say? There is no answer to that, right? You're talking to a god.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I asked him the same about fish. And he says, yeah, it's great. You can eat fish, no problem. I said, how much do you eat? He said, no, I don't eat any. Why? I don't like it. So, and then interesting thing, I forgot to mention that in the video, but now just the thought, like an arrow, just flies in front of my
Mhm.
mind. I spoke to his wife as well. She was a beautiful woman. I think she was about 45, 46 when I was there. Jacqueline Noubre. She won many competitions, bodybuilding, female bodybuilding. But in those days, women were simply beautiful. They were very feminine and lean, and the bodies were fantastic.
Mhm.
And she was very lean, very stunning, beautiful woman. So I talked to her about diet, and I said, "What about fruit? Do you eat fruit?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "I have an apple per week." I said, "Sorry, a day?" No, she said, "Maybe once a week." So this yet another one. How women stay in shape, and from my experience, I trained so many of them. Women and carbs simply don't go together.
Mhm.
And the moment they cut the carbs out of the diet and switch to high protein, medium fat diet, women change dramatically. Not in months, in weeks.
Mhm.
So yeah, this is true. Golden era bodybuilders all follow more or less the same diet, which was meat and eggs. That was introduced by Vince Gironda. Vince wasn't scientific in the modern understanding of science, but experiments that he did were extremely scientific because
Mhm.
they had to bring results.
Mhm.
And he advised his people, his ultra cut diet, known as such, was 3 meals a day, and every meal was the same. Any type of meat and eggs. When they ask him how much, as much as you want. But no buts. You will only eat as much as you can. When I say that to people, say, "Oh, Nash, but this is a lot. I can eat." I said, "No, you're not going to eat a lot. Try to have
Yeah.
2 pounds steak and 3, 4 eggs on the top. Let me know when you finish that." And
Mhm.
then they called me and said, "I couldn't finish it."
Mhm.
So I said, eat 3 times like that, and you will see your body will tell you how much you need to eat. And now this is another chapter in the universe that is all about nutrition. That I think the very wrong thing that we have all succumbed to in the modern times is to calculate food, not to feel the food. We should eat when we are hungry. This is natural chain of events. You need ghrelin, you need hormone to tell you that you're ready to eat, that your digestive system is ready to absorb. People are just stuffing themselves all the time. This is how they develop visceral fat, for example, which is then detrimental for metabolic health. But if you eat when you are hungry, you won't eat 6, 7 times a day. Stick to eggs and meat, and you're going to end up eating maybe twice, maybe once, maybe 3 times, depending. But allow your body to be ready to absorb. Don't force it. And we have lost that instinct. I say to people, you need to develop the hunger for protein
Mhm.
after a heavy, let's say, back workout, chest workout. What are you hungry for? Can you get to that answer? Don't think about it. Phil, do you want to eat pizza or you want to eat a steak? So once we awake those feelings and instincts within us, I think things are completely different and very, very beneficial for us.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting that you coach that and that the golden era guys did that intuitive eating because that's exactly what I found for my medical patients that this and I've also made the same suggestion to athletes that I've worked with. Same thing that you just eat intuitively. Your body's going to tell you. You have these signals that your body understands how much nutrients you need. Every animal in the wild instinctively knows how much to eat and when to stop. We've actually discovered more recently that we have receptors in our stomach that actually track up the vagus nerve to the brain and calculate the macros and micros that are in your stomach. And so in real time, your brain can tell what nutrients are in there long before you ever absorb it in your small intestine. And so just by that alone, your brain will sort of down regulate the taste response, and then all of a sudden it just stops tasting good. And you get to a point where like, ugh, I can't do this anymore. And I've had patients try to push that and say like, oh, I can't do this meat diet because it takes me 2 hours to finish a meal. I have to force myself. And I ask them, well, does it taste good at first? And they invariably say yes, that it tastes amazing, but they get halfway through the meal and it's really hard and it takes them another 2 hours. And I just point out that they were finished 2 hours ago because their body was telling them under no uncertain circumstances that they needed to stop eating. So that's very interesting that they were doing the same thing, which is just eating intuitively. That's really interesting.
Yeah, but this is only going to happen if you eat staple foods, if you eat
That's it.
protein and fat.
Yeah.
If you eat carbohydrates, that will never happen. So,
Yeah.
what is the proof? Everybody has proven that in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
guaranteed. Everybody who is watching, how much ice cream can you eat while watching a movie on Netflix?
Mm-hmm.
A limited amount. You can eat a big tub, 1 kg ice cream. You can't stop. What about
Mm-hmm.
popcorn? What about all these biscuits and stuff? Why don't we stop? Because we don't have developed those regulators, those sensors that will tell you it's enough.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect the reason why we overeat all this junk food and carbohydrates is that the body is constantly looking for protein. And
Mm-hmm.
if it doesn't find the protein in those junk products, the body will allow you to stuff yourself more because simply is waiting for the protein. If there is a little protein, the body will wait for more. And this is why there is nothing to stop you. I always say to people, I give you 10 boiled eggs and I'm going to sit in front of you and wait. Let's see how many you're going to eat. They're looking at me like, oh, let's try 4. On the 5th, most of them collapse. They can't eat the 5th one.
Yeah.
So what about 10? 10 eggs are 60 grams of protein. It's not a problem, but
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard for anybody to eat that.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because eggs are full of everything that you need for developing life. The only environment in which every single life on planet happens is actually an egg, even human life. So what is in the egg that we eat? Chicken eggs, for example. We
Mm-hmm.
have 6 grams of protein, 6 grams of fat. Where are carbohydrates there? They're not necessary. They're not essential. They don't exist. There is no such a thing as essential carbohydrates. We have essential amino acids, essential fatty acids. But what happened to carbohydrates and all these 500-600 grams per day when they're not essential? Why would you do this? You see, from wherever you come to this problem, you will always come to the same result. You have a non-essential macronutrient, which is literally energy full food, and nothing more than that. There is nothing essential in them. This is why if you eat them, if you need them, you should really be on the necessary minimum. And I have found that for bodybuilders, that is never more than 100 to 150 grams per day, not even every day. These are bodybuilders who have great metabolism, who train almost every day. But for majority of people, including myself, I rarely eat carbohydrates. If I eat them, I eat them once per week. Maybe when I'm training legs, I would have maybe 70 grams before workout and maybe another 50 grams after, even if I do that, because there are many weeks when I just don't eat carbs at all. And I don't feel that I need them. If I feel, I will have them. But they're so random that I can really say that my diet is mainly protein and fat.
I'm very good. Yeah, I've actually come to very similar conclusions about why we overeat with carbohydrates and that junk food. Certainly, our bodies are looking at this, whatever's in our stomach, and saying, "Hey, there's no food here. There's no actual nutrients here." So it's giving you those hunger signals still, and that's why things like protein and fat are so satiating because that's what your body's looking for. Your body doesn't track calories; it tracks nutrients, and it wants those
Exactly.
nutrients. And so it's not saying, "Well, wait, we're up to 1,600 calories. Better slow down." It's saying, "Hey, we've only had 20 grams of protein today. We've only had 20 grams of fat, and we've had no vitamins and minerals. Like, get on the page." Also, there's hormonal changes that carbohydrates will raise insulin. Insulin blocks lipolysis, so now you can't generate more energy, and your blood sugar will start dropping to a point that you feel lethargic. You can't make ketones, and you feel pretty crummy, and you go and chase those carbs again. It also blocks leptin, which is a satiety hormone, which now will not be able to reach your brain, and your brain thinks that you're emaciated and we're starving and our blood sugar is dropping. So it panics and said, hey, we need to eat, we need to eat, we need to eat. There's also very clever food scientists that work very hard to find compounds and chemicals that mimic some of these natural flavors that are, and that's what it literally says, natural flavorings that mimic those flavors that our brain says, yes, we want those. Those are nutrients we want, but they don't actually exist in that food. And then it goes down to your stomach. Your brain says, yes, we want that nutrient. It goes into your stomach and there's nothing there. There's no nutrient there. And so now your brain's saying, no, no, more of that, more of that. And they become this highly palatable, addictive substance that you overeat by design so that they can sell more product. And I've even seen them on 60 Minutes. The food scientists actually say that's what they're trying to do. Saying here's this big flavor and then it goes away quickly so that you want the next chip and the next bite and the next piece. So that you get this sort of compulsive relationship with eating that food. And so they've tacked on, it's called an evolutionary trap where you have this response that says, yes, do that, but it's something that's not the original, the original pathway, and it's now something harmful to us, like this junk food that has been in, basically they've sort of taken over those pathways to co-opt our hunger signals so that we just keep eating and keep eating. So I think that, I think that's done intentionally, unfortunately, just to sell more of these products, I think.
Yeah, without any doubt. But even carbohydrates themselves, they will create a vicious insulin cycle that probably hook you up. You can't get out of it. I have people who are, especially bodybuilders, they say, oh, Nash, if I don't eat in 2 hours, I start shaking. Of course you're going to start shaking because you eat carbs in every meal. So welcome to the vicious insulin cycle. So your insulin is always up, your glucagon is always down. So you're storing, but you're never burning. And here we go. You have to eat every 2 hours. You're like in prison. The food becomes punishment for you. It's not. I don't even think about food. If I eat at 10, my next meal will be like 4 or 5 or something like that. When I feel hungry, I say, "Oh, really? I need to eat now." But I'm very active. I train almost every day, and I do a lot of work throughout the day. And I mean, I don't want to. I want to be slave of food. I don't live to eat. I eat to live. And this is the principle that has been turned upside down. People should be eating in order to sustain life. They shouldn't eat, they live in order to eat. But now food is the biggest commodity. If you look across the cultures, across the regions in the world, it's always food. When they invite you food on the table, first of all, food, drink. So, food is just necessity. Don't make the eudaimonia, as Aristotle would say, the final happiness in food. No, it's not. It's just one of the things that you need, but there are much more important things like your health, your look, your strength, your shape, etc.